Great. So usually we have Rabbi Adyanov speak first for about 20 minutes, and he is not available. He's doing performing a bar mitzvah for someone in which begins at 4:30 today. So that was on short notice. I don't know if he's filling in for someone. So we'll see how it goes with us without rabbinic supervision. But hopefully we'll be able to discuss this and fruitfully. So first, I'm going to read the the text of uh, of this Mishnah, which is one before the last in Pirkei Avot, in all of the book of Pirkei Avot. It's said Rabbi Yosei, the son of Kisma, once I was traveling and I encountered a man. He greeted me, and I returned his greetings. Said he to me, Rabbi, where are you from? Said I to him, from a great city of sages and scholars am I. Said he to me, Rabbi, would you like to dwell with us in our place? I will give you 1,000,000 dinars, which is like pounds, of gold, precious stones, and pearls. Said I to him, if you were to give me all the silver, gold, precious stones, and pearls in the world, I would not dwell anywhere but in a place of Torah. Indeed, so it is written in the book of Psalms, written by King David, the king of Israel. I prefer the Torah of your mouth over thousands in gold and silver. That's in the Psalms. Furthermore, when a person passes from this world, neither silver nor gold, nor precious stones, nor pearls accompany them. Only Torah and good deeds, as is stated in Proverbs, Mishle, which we studied together. When you go from this world, it will direct you. When you lie down, it will watch over you. And when you awaken, it shall be your speech. When you go, it will direct you in this world towards the end of our lives. When you lie down, it will watch over you, meaning in the grave. And when you awaken, it shall be our speech, meaning it will defend you. It will be your advocate for the world to come. Also, in Haggai, the prophet, it says, mine is the silver and mine is the gold. So says the Lord of hosts. So a little bit about Rabbi Yosei. Yosei ben Kisma was a third generation Tana of the Tanaim, right after the Amoraim, and one of the leaders of his generation. And he taught in Caesarea and lived there. And his literary legacy is small, but several details of his life stayed with us. During the Bar Kokhba revolt, which occurred during Rabbi Yosei's later years, he was among the pacifists who felt that Rome was too powerful to revolt against, and that it was not a good idea to run the revolt. So he's one of the early pacifists. He also warned Rabbi Hanania, who we learned about with Akiva, those who were teaching Torah publicly, kind of resisting and, for Rabbi Yosei's opinion, almost provoking the Romans, that you should not do it publicly. But they continued, and of course, Rabbi Hanania was killed for that. He predicted many of the terrible tragedies that befell the Jewish people after his death, and two of his pithy maxims are famous. One is that two are better than three, in the sense that 2 legs in one's youth are better than 2 old legs plus a cane in one old age. And that appears in the Talmud in Shabbat. And the other one is, woe to one who goes away and does not return, in the sense of losing youth. Just a few interpretations from the sources about this text. When he says, "Pam achat hayiti ma'alech baderech v'paga bi adam acher," it means the other person came to him. And that's comes to explain why he greeted me and I returned his greetings, because we learned earlier in Pirkei Avot of the high value of being the first to greet someone else when you see them. But according to the interpretation here, so he had not seen this person yet. Maybe he was studying, and the person came over to him. And when asked where he was, where he lived, he said, in a place of Torah study, and turns down the option of 1,000,000 dinars of gold and stones and pearls. And then he explains with three texts here of why really the stones and the gold and the silver are something you don't take with you, and that the Torah is so important to him that he would never live in a place where there are not Torah scholars with whom he could sit and study and learn. He would not want to be the only person there. Kind of goes differently from the Chabad people who set up somewhere where there is no one and try to begin teaching from there. According to the Midrash, the word once, when he says once I was traveling, is meant quite literally, because generally he spent all his time in the study hall and had no occasion to meet strangers. But perhaps this time he had that just once happen, that a certain person met him and greeted him, and he greeted him back. So the idea is that the other person was amicable. It's not that he had a dislike to the person. It was just the primacy of Torah that he described. The idea that he comes from a city of Chachamim, V'shel Sofrim Ani, the term Chachamim denotes Talmudic knowledge, while Sofrim means experts in scripture, in the 5 books of scripture that we have. So that's the city of scholars. And he says, I come from this great city of scholars, none of whom is very wealthy, and they cannot provide for my needs, so I'm in search of a livelihood. And we've spoken in the past that the leading rabbis of their time worked at all sorts of jobs, whether they were shoemakers or sandal makers or all sorts of jobs. And the man is inviting Rabbi Yosef to serve as the rabbi of his town, and he didn't have all that honor in the city where he was, but the figure of 1,000,000 is an exaggeration. Just that he would give Rabbi Yosef everything he needed, type thing. And it was in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Nehorai, who said you should exile yourself to a place of Torah and not rely on self-study. So many of us here study some on our own, but it's important to be in a place where there are others. And that's described by at least one of the interpreters I read, that just as a fish cannot survive out of water, so Jews cannot survive without Torah. And on a personal level, I'll say that my grandchildren have been visiting from abroad, and when they come back to Israel, they feel just like fish jumping back into water, instead of being in the little bag that they get when they're when you buy fish, until you bring them home and let them loose in an aquarium. So that's how they seem to be, and the kids just get to speak Hebrew, get to meet their old friends, and that's what makes them feel so at home with themselves and with their lives. And that basically is what Rabbi Yossi is saying, this basic truth, is that a Jew needs to live in a place of Torah, and only where there's authentic Torah study is there the power to generate spiritual growth. And he gives these examples from King David and from Haggai and from the Proverbs. So I guess these are the important things out of this text. And each of us, I think all of us here today, are people who have moved. We lived elsewhere, and we chose to be living here in Israel. And the idea and Lorena will be here in Jerusalem in June, to be specific. And yes, there's a lot of back and forth. Liz is traveling in the next week or two to the United States to family. But basically, we've chosen to be here, and that's a really big choice. And how important place is to us, I think, is in some ways significantly different from how it was back then, in the sense that we have Zoom and they did not. So they could not get together with other people and study Torah unless they were physically in a place where they could meet and talk to each other. And today that's less important. But here, as Jews, we have decided to live here in Israel with the challenges, significant challenges that Israel gives for any Oleh Chadash. And yet we have decided that as Jews, the best place for us to live will be as Jews. And so years after I came here in 1979, the whole concept of how important it is to be living in Israel, and that being my way of realization or fulfillment of my Zionism, is why after some discussion with Rabbi Edgar, we thought that our next subject, as we finish Pirkei Avot in another week or two, will be learning about Zionism and discussing Zionism together, both from its roots and what Zionism has meant over the years and what it means universally today and individually for ourselves today. And so I hope that's going to be a interesting enough subject, and we'll bring sources to discuss about it. So
Nice.
all that said, let's see if I can change my view here and see all of you. Great. And Lorena, how about you would be first in discussing this
Well,
section?
I'm delighted to. Yeah, for me, that was very valuable what you said because there is Zoom now. So, but for me, it's absolutely vital to be in Israel, to move to Israel, to live there, to everything. Because yeah, and why? For me, it's as when I am in another place, it to me I feel I can't live my truth. For me, living in the diaspora, it's I'm everywhere confronted with untruth, like things that are said about Israel or people or history or everything. And yeah, I don't want to be in such an environment anymore. Like now, for instance, I'm in Sweden and it's already beginning. It may seem like a small thing, but it's not to me. So it's already beginning about the Eurovision Song Contest and that they don't want the Israeli girl to come and everything and all the lies. So for me, living in Israel and always was. I mean, sometimes I was somewhere else, but for me, that is the place where I can live in my truth, and that you cannot do via the Zoom.
So we are physical beings, and And the physical feeling here is significant, even if we can
Yeah,
communicate on an intellectual level. Uh, on a mental level, we can communicate by Zoom, but on a physical level, we
yeah,
are physical as well. And just to explain if it isn't clear, there's a whole movement to prevent Israel from singing in the song contest. There's a European song contest, which we've won in the past sometimes and not done so well in other times, but the countries of Europe are trying to exclude us in just plain anti-Semitism, having nothing to do with who the song or the person who's singing it or anything like that. And it's a shame, but
yeah,
we'll see how that plays out in Basel in Switzerland, which is supposed to be a neutral place.
yeah,
Perhaps the
yeah, yeah,
audience or the people who are there are not going to be so neutral. Liz,
yeah,
thank you, Lorena.
yeah. You're welcome. My
Liz,
pleasure.
Liz, how did you handle this Mishnah?
Um, I thought it was in some ways very beautiful. Very beautiful, the concept of um, learning Torah compared to how many riches you have in the world. You know, we always say you can't take it with you. And apparently, Torah study, we don't have to take with us, it comes with us. It's part and parcel. And it's, to me, comforting to know that there is kind of like when you move on, you're not moving alone. Um, and the reason, by the way, that I'm going to America next week is because May 18th is the Israel Day Parade in New York. And there are going to be thousands of people coming to hopefully celebrate Israel and encouraging people, of course, to come to Israel. I'm going with my volunteer with Sarel, and they're having a big summit meeting that night. And the rest of the time is just to visit family. But it, when I fell in love with Israel, when I turned 17, when I was here, you know, it was a lifelong, I didn't know then that it would become such a dream or that the dream would actually be able to turn into a reality. And so discussing Zionism, you know, is a good thing for us to have. And in terms of it, the Torah portion or the parsha for this week, um, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Mhm.
Well, it's not always easy to make the choice. And I think as Anglo people in Israel, we are challenged both by Israelis who say, "What kind of choice did you make?" and by people abroad, some who say bravo, and some of whom say, "Are you crazy?" And maybe I think there are all sorts of quotes, Ben Gurion and others, that you have to be a little crazy, but it pays off in good ways. Michael, if you could unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. It reminded me of two totally different things. One was a German concept, Sitzenleben, our place in society, our place in the world. And then also, they talk about the fact that the place is more important than money. That reminded me of Ishet Hayal in Michelet, the woman of value. The woman, her price is far beyond the value of pearls and goes on and on. So those were two, and particularly they do cite in here precious stones nor pearls. So that's why it reminded me of that. But I think we all make different choices based on different things that transpire in our lives. Uh, did I face anti-Semitism where I live? No, but there was always, when you were brought up, whether you call it overt or not, uh, Jewish holidays were not recognized when we grew up or when I was in early public school. I had Christmas shoved down my throat, and that was in public school. Hanukkah was never mentioned. And when I moved, I wound up, for odd reasons, joining a Zionist organization. And I learned and I followed that tradition. But it's basically what you're exposed to and the way you react to it. Some people passively say, oh, big deal. I wound up in a Zionist organization and we wanted to go to a swimming pool and there were no swimming pools. The Jewish center that had it, none of my friends could afford to join. And you could join from almost nothing if you joined a Jewish organization, and it ran the gamut. And that's where I was exposed to Zionism.
What
So
organization is that?
what?
Jewish organization was that?
Young Judea.
Hmm.
And then I became active in Hamag Shemim on the college campus. And at that point, Jewish organizations were recognized. There was no anti-Semitism. I went to Queens College, part of the City University of New York. There was no anti-Semitism there when I grew up. Queens was, or at least the area in which I lived in, was heavily Jewish. I don't know now it's totally different. We have bad publicity. And it's the way, yeah, time and place. It's exactly what it is that's going on today. We've allowed this concept of the oppressed to take over, but nobody looks as to why that may have occurred, and you accept it blindly.
Well, yes, things were a little different in our college years. I would guess that some of the organizations, the fraternities, were not would have had people who were speaking anti-Semitically, and of course, in time, Jewish fraternities and sororities developed as a response to that. But I certainly agree with you that the anti-Semitism was much less overt and much less accepted as something that people would not be ashamed to say in public to offend us or to attack us, as compared to at least over the last couple of years, when the propaganda machine of anti-Semitism has become much more overt, and of course the levels of violence and anti-Semitic acts all over Europe and all over the United States and many places in the world has become overt and not always condemned by those who would say that's totally unacceptable.
One,
And
one
that's been
comment
going on for a
related,
few years now.
one comment related to that. When they talk about uh, it's okay to make these comments about Jews. I always want to know what crossed my mind is, what would you have done if these comments were made against blacks? What would you do if these actions were taken against black? Oh no, we can't do that. That's not okay. That's what we've allowed to happen. This wokeism, this ultra liberalism, this way of viewing the world now we're society is killing itself.
Well, I was personally very much affected when Black Lives Matter came out with a constitution that condemned one country in the world and had no other international agenda. And that's that they
So,
condemned Israel for existing.
so
And
what you're telling me in reality is that it's okay for them to say it, but you dare not say it against them, which
yes,
means that it's racist.
yeah, well, that's whether Jews are a race is something that Hitler did his best to try and say that we were some kind of inferior race. And of course, compared to the black population in the United States of some 30 million, so the 5 or 6 million that are in the United States who are Jewish are much fewer and much less likely to rise and defend ourselves or our rights, and much more likely to rise and defend other people's rights. But Imen Ili Mili, this is what we learned from Hillel in Pirkei Avot, that if we're not going to be for ourselves, no one else is going to be for us. And it's not enough. You have to be for other people too. But if you're not for yourself, no one else will be. Flores, how did you deal with this?
Well, I concentrated when I got your email on the last sentence. It was the question, how important is where you live to you?
Mhm.
And I ignored the being part of the Zionist realization because I attached it to the paragraph that we read where he said he couldn't live in a place there were no sages or Talmud or this, that. And when I hear, as I'm the only one that's British, but I know Lorena's from Europe, so in a certain way, we share something. Jews were always persecuted in Europe. It was, it didn't matter where you were. And in America, you all had freedom. You were Americans, and by religion, you were Jewish. In Britain, you were a British Jew. It's only recently you can now be an English Jew. But otherwise, you were a British Jew because you didn't have ancestors going back hundreds of years to qualify to be an English Jew. And we were a much smaller population. In Europe as well, the populations were always smaller than America. You all were in millions. At the height of, in Britain, uh, just before the Second World War or something, it was 500,000. And now it's 250,000, and there's, loosening. So it was very important how you were brought up in Britain. So if you had some sort of a religious background, it was always wanting to live with other Jews because there you had the kosher butcher, you could have whatever was necessary. Whereas in America, you were very lucky because of the population. You could go into the supermarket and buy kosher things. You didn't have to live in a Jewish environment to be able to, if you wanted to keep kashrut. And the synagogues were always in certain places. So you had to decide what was your background, which stream of Judaism do you follow. There was a very large synagogue in the center of London, which was Reform. So many people joined it because the rabbi was very nice. And that I think then a few small reform came in other places. I grew up in the predominantly Jewish areas, so it was very comfortable. So even though your neighbor might be not Jewish, you did have that support mechanism of your Jewish background, and you went, so I think it is important where you live because certain parts of my lifestyle. When I was married and had children, it was important for me, living in a country that was predominantly not Jewish, that they had Jewish friends, that Shabbat they went to synagogue, they were everything, so that their roots were deep. And we always came to Israel during the Christmas holidays because it was 2 weeks there. So they had their roots, so they knew that. So I think there is a huge difference between Jews growing up in America and Jews growing up in Europe, because we always carried that fear. And most of the immigrants who came to Britain, they came from Eastern Europe. They were then the influx were a few thousands that came that from the were Holocaust survivors. So there was quite an agenda. So when I hear your talk, you all had so much freedom. Schools, the good schools, only took 10% Jewish students, and we accepted it because there was nothing we could do. And so it's really lovely to hear your talk. You had such freedom of thought. As you said, there was no anti-Semitism, or you weren't aware of it. Whereas we always knew there was that undercurrent. So Jews always stayed with Jews. Or because you heard that famous thing, my best friend is Jewish, yes, from a non-Jewish person.
Yes, some of my best friends are Jewish.
Yes.
That's a way to prove that you're not an anti-Semite.
Yes.
Well, that's good. I like to look at this sometimes from the opposite point of view, and what happens if we're in a place of no Torah. What does that mean? What does that mean? And Rabbi Edgar's best, or my favorite expression that he uses is, if there were no laws, then there would be no red lights, green lights, there would be no traffic lights. And how long would Netanya or New York or Haifa last before everything was all gnarled up and everybody was stuck trying to get through any intersection at all? And if you do not have a moral code that the Torah provides, so let's say you did have 1,000,000 pieces of gold and precious stones and silver and so on, there would be no commandment, thou shalt not steal. Anybody could steal what you had anyway. So the concept that we have to be in a place, a physical place, where there is a moral code, where there is some level of, I'm going to call it a constitution. We all accept this as our basic law or basic rule. This week I learned, I'm learning Talmudic pages each day, and one page discussed the 613 mitzvot and said really they're all based on the 10 commandments. And then there were those who said really it's based on just 3, right? Which we learned from the prophet Micha, right? Love justice, judge fairly, and walk humbly with God. And then someone else said, well, it's really just 2, and some people say be a mensch, and that's the 1. And then all the rest of them are just kind of explanations or figuring out how to apply that moral code. But basically, to live in a place without a moral code, without a constitution, without some shared understanding can be, it's hard to imagine, but it could be pretty awful. Mom Ted, welcome. You came a little late, so you didn't hear everybody, but let's hear what you have to say about this Mishnah. You have to unmute yourself, otherwise we can't hear you. And they're, of course, clocking in from New York City. We should be able to hear you now.
Unmuted. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Uh, well, I think I should skip this time.
Okay.
Ted?
Yeah, well, you know, uh, I think one appreciates uh, the value of money when they're poor, and every dime counts. And when they're comfortable or even wealthy, uh, at least my attitude, anything more or less in terms of money is just changing numbers. Uh, and I just think of someone like Elon Musk, who has $728 billion. Those numbers to me are meaningful. I'm sorry, I meant to say meaningless. But he can throw those numbers around for political influence. And I guess it's just a matter of ego to have bigger numbers. But when it comes to ideas and thoughts, it seems you never have enough. At least I feel that way. The more I know, I feel the more I need to know. And that's why the Torah is so important to me, because not that I know very much, and maybe I'm poor with regard to religious studies, but I get very excited about improving my uh, knowledge statistics, and I pay no attention really to what's in my bank account. I hope I made some sense there. I don't know.
Makes very good sense. And I'm going to say a couple words about wealth that I did not before, and that this Mishnah follows the one the previous week, which said something good about wealth. I'll remind you, we talked about it, and it was Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda who said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that beauty, strength, wealth, honor, wisdom, and old age, hoary age, and children befit the righteous and befit the world. And the discussion of wealth that we had then, of course, is not that one should try to just accumulate a bigger number that they'll never deal with, but that those who are righteous, that the positive wealth is also a positive and befits those who are righteous as opposed to those who are not righteous. Of course, wealth can enable someone to become charitable, and wealth can enable us to study without financial pressures. And one can advance causes honestly because they don't need to flatter anyone. But of course, an open account of having unlimited money also allows one to indulge in forbidden activities which they should not. So this kind of came as a balance also to Shimon Bar Yochai, who said something good about wealth. This one putting wealth into the perspective that it not be all that important. So these are the basic ideas that came out. And And yes, we do want to keep studying, and in life, those can accumulate more money than they can ever use, but it's debatable whether someone can accumulate so much knowledge and wisdom that they couldn't use some more. That we can continue to value and to treasure, and hopefully by studying together, we all share some of these wisdoms and share the perspectives. I'm not sure it's always the same. I would say in terms of Flores's concept of the difference between living in America and living in England, I think that the Jews in the United States mostly clustered. New York City, Boston, Chicago, big cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles, and big parts of the United States had and continue to have very few Jews, and a lot more feeling of isolation, and of course that also leading to a lot more assimilation. Whereas when there are many of us together in one place, and as I grew up, there were 3 million Jews in the New York City greater metropolitan area, and now a lot fewer, but still about the same number of Jews in the United States as there were, about 6 million. Well, I would end today's session with gratitude for our having the Torah and for studying it from the sources. And this is 2,000 years ago. And of course, the situation of Rabbi Yosef was different from our situation in some ways. And in other ways, he was very pressed by Rome conquering the Jewish state, which it did, and successfully for some time. And we have those who are much more of a multitude than we are, trying to crush or exterminate the Jewish state even today. So we have kind of that in common. And so when we choose where we're going to live and whether we're going to live in a place with a shared morality, constitution, feeling, then we have more in common with Rabbi Yosef. Those of us who are more pacifist as he was, those of us who might feel that that fighting back is more of a solution than finding compromises. There's the whole gamut today as there was then, and probably always will be, that those are the positions that people can take or exemplify. But I would end with a prayer, thanking God for the Torah that we have and for the mitzvah, the commandment to study it. So anyone who likes can mute or unmute with me as I say that prayer. It is Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kiddushanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. Blessed is God who gave us the commandment to study Torah, and that's what we did. And I look forward to seeing you all on next Thursday. Liz, if you can, and if you're in flight, then I guess I will try to record it, and you've been able to
Well,
save those recordings.
yeah,